Hello, welcome to another episode of Lectures of Fallen Wisdom. So today we're going to talk about focus and trying to get things, trying to commandeer this body. The thing is, we've talked about how the person that's usually in control is an unconscious version of yourself that's on kind of an autopilot. And every once in a while, the person that's listening to this can affect that autopilot by becoming aware, by drawing attention to it, drawing the unconscious mind's attention to it, by kind of like waking up the unconscious mind and being like, hey, check out for this. So you don't have direct control of yourself. You have this kind of it's like a control of another person. It's like you have to kind of manipulate that person. So if you want to be things, it's not enough to just say, I have this plan and I'm going to stick to it, and I stick to the plan and then I get there. Because what happens is you make a plan, but your unconscious mind is in control and it decides to do what it wants to do, and it looks at that plan and it just kind of blows it off. Like there was this thing that came out recently. It was like a journal it was like a life journal, and you're supposed to like fill it out, and as you fill it out, it kind of would make you do stuff, and it probably works. But the thing is, I got that journal, and it just kind of sat there on my shelf. I didn't even want to pick it up. My unconscious mind was like, I don't even want to get into it. Start writing, then I'm going to have to obligate myself to things. But that's what happens. If you want yourself to do something, then you just have to kind of write it onto a piece of paper. It's like as simple as that. Because you wrote it onto a piece of paper, it kind of gives its life of its own. It draws your unconscious mind's attention. It wakes it up for a second and allows it to make changes. You're always on some kind of autopilot. So you're actually, the idea, that's why you should never really feel guilty for anything, because you're basically like a self-driving car that's put in a program and it's just going. And you can't really make changes on the fly when something comes your way. Maybe after training your mind over and over again and getting to the habit of being sensitive to those kinds of things, you can kind of train your autopilot to anticipate those things. I mean, the fact that they're trying to invent these cars that drive on their own, and they're encountering, every time they do it, they encounter something new that the car has not dealt with. And so they have to go back to the drawing board and reprogram it and send the car out again and see if the car doesn't, avoids that problem. I'm sure some of these self-driving cars, they'll probably kill children, if because of certain blind spots that occur in the programming, and they have to fix that. Is it the car's fault that it killed the children? Well, it is the fault of the programmer. So to the extent of the programmers, you have more control as a programmer of a car than you do as a programmer of you, the human. So there's less responsibility there, but there is responsibility, and there's only responsibility, but it's in how you're setting up the autopilot. So you are essentially on autopilot all the time. You can try to make yourself constantly in the now, aware, so that you're in conscious control of every action. But even then, even when you're so fully aware where you are, totally in the now, your unconscious is still the one making the ultimate decision and still the one causing the action. So you need to penetrate into that unconscious. So, like for example, if you have a bad habit, you'll never be able to quit the habit by just being like, I'm going to quit this shit, and then just trying to quit, because your unconscious mind does it. That's why it's a habit. So your unconscious mind will just pick it up and do it again without any prompting. And in fact, if you think about quitting, if you think about not doing it, you just kind of trigger the unconscious mind into doing it. So it's like you can't use your conscious mind just to be like, oh, I need to quit giving yourself the idea to do it when you say I want to quit it. It's like not thinking of an elephant or something like that. So you have to, I mean, a really good method if you have a bad habit is just to write down every time you do it. Write down like into a little book. And each day you look at that book and you see maybe there's times where you wanted to do it and you didn't do it. And so you can note that down too. Now, the problem is like most of us will never do that. Most of us will never open a book and write down the times that we do our bad habit, because we just won't. Because that in and of itself takes conscious effort, and that requires also more discipline. So discipline's a misnomer. It's not about discipline. It's about training, programming your car. Is that discipline? I don't know. I think it's just a function of programming. I don't think discipline is a misnomer because it implies that your conscious mind can control your body with just the right amount of discipline. Well, it just doesn't work that way. And I talked about it. One of my most popular shows is like about discipline and how it's very important. And what's important more is what looks like discipline. And what looks like discipline is just good habits. And good habits you form by repetition and by training the bad habits out. If you want to have good habits, you can just kind of get rid of bad habits. Now, there's different ways of resisting. Now, you can do this thing with the journal where you write down each time you do it, and then you can start to identify like what's triggering what are you feeling? And you're feeling like, oh, maybe whenever I feel a little bit like uninspired, I reach for some alcohol. And then you start to understand that, like, okay, when you're bored or uninspired, you're gonna take a drink. Maybe if drinking is your problem, I'm just saying it's just an example. But you start to see the triggers, and what you can do is it's weird. It's like if you just resist the trigger like 4 or 5 times, it becomes much easier to resist. Like each time you resist it, you develop a muscle in your psyche that like resists it, and it's easier to resist if you're writing down the time that you're doing it. Now, like I said, it's very unlikely that you will have a notebook with you and do all these things that they recommend, all these self-helps. Like they kind of be like, take a book, write it down, write down each time you do the habit, study it, think about it. Well, look, just think about writing it down. That's actually enough. When you think about the idea that you're going to get that notebook, just like plan to get the notebook that you're going to write it down. That actually does enough, because then you start thinking about writing down each time you bad habit that you don't like. You start thinking about writing it down, and that you would need to write. If you had the notebook, you would write it down, and that just draws your unconscious mind out of its slumber and allows it to kind of make program changes. And it kind of weeds out that bad habit. And similarly with good habits, you want to instill good habits, then you write those good habits down, like I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And you actually can, if you just sit for like 20 minutes and just think about the thing you want to get done and think about doing it and how you're going to do it and just kind of like go through the steps of doing it, and just demystify it in your mind for like 20 minutes. It kind of it's like you talking out loud in your psyche, and you eventually wake up your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind hears this discussion through all the noise. But if you have a directed discussion in your mind for like 20 minutes about something that you want to do that you've been procrastinating, for example, because your unconscious mind, which is actually in control, just won't fucking do it. Well, if you just sit for like 20 minutes and you just think about doing that thing you've been procrastinating about, you will just do it after the 20 minutes. Like it will just seem like a big deal, because your unconscious mind will just you'll have programmed your unconscious mind to do it. and then you'll just be on autopilot doing it. You know, it's just like you can't get anything accomplished with the conscious mind unless you create an autopilot program inside of yourself that does it. And then once you do that, it's like you're riding a roller coaster. You're not actually pushing it. The only push that you need to do is this push of making aware your conscious mind, getting your conscious mind to respond to the programming. So writing things on a piece of paper and then looking at it and just kind of recording every instance of when you do the right thing, that's another way of doing it. Also, you don't actually need to write. You just can think about writing. And you can think about doing it. Now, there's also there's some apps that you can get on your iPhone and other smartphones that one is called Plant, and it's all about you grow a tree each time. You set it a little thing, a timer for like 20 minutes where you actually do stuff. And it grows a little tree for you, and then eventually a big tree grows each time, and you kind of see yourself progressing through the tree that you grow through the app. Whatever. The point is, anything you can do that makes your conscious mind kind of wake up and decide to reprogram itself. And it's done very subtly through like little things. So if you just like write something down, it will trigger it. Like if you want something, if you want to obtain something, if you want to get something done, if you just write down what you want to get done, like it's just somehow it creates its own energy. And if you think about writing it, sometimes that's enough too. If it's not working if thinking about writing is not working, then just try writing it down. It's just, if for some reason writing it down engages your unconscious mind. And it takes no effort, so your unconscious mind won't resist it. But actually it does even. It does even resist that. So that's why I say, just think about writing it down. That's very hard for your unconscious mind to resist. Now, when you're not exercising your conscious mind, your unconscious mind exercises your mind. And your unconscious mind is kind of just recycling bad memories. Why? Because they're unresolved. All bad memories are memories that you can't put away because you can't file, because you can't make sense of it. And so you're always still processing the bad memories. And the good memories have all been processed. You know, it's like you have a good meal, it gets digested very well, and you're hungry again. You have a bad meal, and you can just go days trying to digest that meal and never feel great and never fully digest it. It's just like, that's like a bad memory. A bad memory is very hard for the mind to digest. So when your mind is not consciously thinking of something, the unconscious mind employs the conscious mind to resolve these negative memories. So they dredge them up. They allow you to think about them. And so you start thinking about things that just make you upset. That because your unconscious mind is churning with these things. It wants a resolution. There is no resolution because it was just a negative memory. The negativity itself is not something that can be resolved. It's just a fundamental fact of it that your unconscious mind doesn't accept. Your unconscious mind is like, no, it must have a reason, it must have a purpose, it must have some grand resolution, it must be assimilated. But your bad memories, they're really like not something you can assimilate. Scientologists actually have a way of dealing with them. They call them engrams, and they go through a like conscious effort of encapsulating every bad memory, labeling them as an engram, and in some way by categorizing them in that fashion, it blunts its ability to forms a sheath around the engram. It no longer has the effect that a bad memory has on a normal person. And what we are is essentially, as we go through life, we become accumulators of bad memories. And sooner or later, because these bad memories are not sheathed in the way the Scientologists do it, or they're not dealt with in any way and they're unresolved, they eventually drive the mind insane. They drive the mind to senility, to breaking apart. Because it's just like having all these open loop programs in your unconscious mind. Eventually, it's like having a bunch of viruses. And eventually the unconscious mind stops working, the unconscious mind being the one that isn't in control mainly of behavior, the one you're trying to program. And once that goes, the conscious mind eventually leaves. It cannot sit atop of a senile unconscious mind. And it starts to become senile as well. So your apparatus, your thinking now apparatus, the one that's thinking now, it requires a unconscious mind that has not gone senile, and an unconscious mind that is not overly filled and overly affected by negative memories. But everybody has negative memories. There's nothing you can do to avoid getting them. You're going to have them. And whenever your mind is not occupied, your mind will be filled with them, because your brain uses your conscious mind when you're not. It uses it to try to come to some resolution to these things. And after a lot of churning through the mind, through this weird combination of the unconscious and the conscious mind, the unemployed conscious mind that's sort of daydreaming, that process eventually does sometimes can, but after much damage that it does, it eventually forms a kind of scar tissue over the bad memory. And it does it through just constantly thinking about it. Just thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, reliving it, releasing all the toxic chemicals in the body each time it gets relived. So it's a cancer-causing thing. I mean, bad memories cause cancer. Make no mistake. If they're not dealt with in the proper fashion, they are carcinogenic, because each time you relive them, your body releases like carcinogenic chemicals, or some poison gets released into your body, and it just to almost to kill the memory by killing you. It's like some kind of chemotherapy. It's a bad aspect of our body that we need to have guard on, because if we don't understand it, we just let these bad memories just keep floating around our minds. Eventually we will go insane. And that's like when you see your mind start to deteriorate a little bit, it's because you have an overabundance of bad memories, and your unconscious mind does not know how to deal with these things. So, time machine. But so when you go to a like a shrink, what they're trying to do is essentially have you deal with these, in session while you deal with it. To have a guy who's nodding his head, listening to your bad memories. It has an effect. It has a way of neutralizing them, and so that's why there's so many fucking psychiatrists. But you can do it another way. You can do it by realizing what it is. It's a bad memory. I mean, it's just like when you understand that a bad memory is carcinogenic, if you will start to resist thinking about it if you can. It's really not a good idea to just relive bad memories. Like, even with a psychiatrist, I think ultimately you're still injecting the poison, and it's still a form of, I think, masochism. Bad memories they're warning signs that your unconscious mind actually doesn't need anymore. What it wants is some kind of grand resolution. It wants essentially the negative memory to be gone, to be erased, but it can't. and it wants it to be erased because it can't process it. And that's the problem, is that there's all these non-processed bad memories, and they accumulate. So there's a way to, how do we clean them out? You only clean them out by not by being in control of your mind most of the time, in such a way that you're not allowing your mind to just float, to think about them freely. You're not allowing your unconscious mind to employ your conscious mind because you're not paying attention. So daydreaming. When you find yourself daydreaming aimlessly, you'll notice that it does drift to the negative. It drifts to the things that make you scared, the things that you're upset that you're not doing, the ways in which your life is not going the way you want it to. All of these are kind of negative emotions that are unprocessed by the unconscious mind. They're very easy to deal with from a conscious perspective, because all you need to do is program your unconscious mind to deal with them. Instead of thinking, oh, I have to be disciplined, I have to do this and this and this, you just have to be a little proactive on how you communicate with the unconscious mind. And that is what focus is. Focus is understanding that you are a passenger in this car with a manual on how to program its machinery, program its direction, its speed, everything. But it's not something that's immediate. You don't have complete control of the wheel. And you wouldn't want that. The conscious mind is not fast enough to do all the little thinking that needs to be done to perform action in this world. It's set up more to deliberate on top. The unconscious mind was here way before the conscious mind. So the unconscious mind has been living millions of human lives without the conscious mind on top. The conscious mind evolved later. So the conscious mind is an advisor and a programmer, but not a driver. So I'm going to start in on the next few ones talking about how you can take control of your machine, and you can put it on the right kind of autopilot that will drive you anywhere you need to go effortlessly. You won't even need to put forth any kind of discipline, or just very minor versions of discipline. As it turns out, studies are showing, I'm looking at the science on this, if you just resist something that you like, let's just say you like energy bars. I have a problem with that. There's all these 0-calorie energy bars, right? Like 0 sugar. They taste like a Snickers, but they and I can't imagine they're that good for you. I mean, they're filled with calories. They have like 300 calories, but there's a little bar, but there's no sugar. And anytime I go somewhere and I'd see one, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna have one of those. And I thought, no sugar, whatever. And I just I guess it made me a little fatter, but whatever. It wasn't that much fatter. So I was okay with it. But I just decided, you know what? I heard this study that if you just resist something that you like, you actually develop a kind of a greater ability to program your unconscious mind than if you just go with every craving. So I decided, I'm not going to eat those things, those energy bars anymore. I'll see them, I won't eat them. I'll see them in the store, I won't buy them. And I've been doing it over the next week. And it's given me tremendous power to program the unconscious mind, because for some reason it makes the conscious mind respect me in some way and start to listen to me more. I don't know how that works, but it gives a sort of nod of control to the conscious mind, and it makes the unconscious mind a little bit aware, a little bit more aware than it usually is, and more responsive. So just resisting something that you like increases what most people refer to as willpower. willpower. But willpower is complete bullshit. There's no such thing as willpower. It's about programming. But your programming will become much easier if you resist something that's a minor thing. It doesn't even have to be something that you really, really like. I never really liked those sports bars anyway that much. I would just eat them because I was bored. But just resisting those gave me an opening of a grid in a certain programming matrix to put myself on the right kind of autopilot. So just think about that. Think about those things. If you are not in control of your action, there's no reason to feel guilt or anything. You're going to feel it because you can't help but feel it, but it's not you it's not the you that's feeling guilty is not is not the person, is not the being that is in control. The being that is in control is an autopilot, and that autopilot is what we're going to be talking about in the next few shows. Thanks for listening. Hey, I'm back. I was being called by somebody else during the end there. But I just think that I wanted to emphasize here, we're going to be, it's really, what's really fascinating, I'm starting to understand, and I never really, because I didn't really delve into the neuroscience of it, was how easy it is to take control of the unconscious mind and make it into an autopilot that is going to be the greatest ride of your life. I mean, you can make yourself into a Superman just by a few little tweaks of the machine and the autopilot. You don't have to be some highly disciplined Navy soldier. You just have to fiddle around in your wiring a little bit, click here, click there, and you're done, and you can just be that guy. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few shows. Check out also for another Logan adventure and story saga. Thanks for listening.